And as I read it, what it was about basically how the word has and story has evolved over the years and over the centuries. And so it traipses through a lot of different stories from the time that people first started writing down and sharing things. Um, Many of you know that there was a time at which in our culture, African culture, there was a way of passing down stories. It was a oral tradition. And in the oral tradition, they would a lot of times find someone out of the tribe who was going to be the storyteller or the keeper of these things. And so it was passed down orally. And then what happens a lot of times with oral traditions, things can get lost or forgotten, or over time, it is so much that happens in any given lifespan that thinking about the lifespans prior to that can be somewhat overwhelming, forgotten, or lost. And so, this idea of writing down stories was something that, whether it was the first ones that were written on clay or on the caves of the wall, has been something that has been reasserting itself ever since I wrote the book. It seems as though now I am inundated with information from various places about this idea of storytelling. And so when I started to put together today's talk, I sat down, and what I saw on the television as I was sitting there was Sunday Morning beginning to talk about this thing called AI. And in talking about AI, they're talking about the artificial intelligence that is now taking over the task of writing stories even. And it is this idea that you can feed an idea into a computer and it come back with a 500-page essay if that is what is requested or whatever else is requested. And it talked about the dangers of what could be lost in the midst of this type of new technology. They switched from that story to then talking about paper and the invention of paper and how that then changed society. When you think about this idea of how the word is spread across the world, regardless of language or time or things, paper has been an amazing invention. It's very hard to take the writing on the walls in Egypt or in Luxor or in Mesopotamia and share those things with in the entire world, because there is a translation that needs to happen, whether it's from hieroglyphics or some other type of print. There are things that preclude our being able to share it readily, whether things were written on scrolls, clay tablets, or whatever. There has had to be a mechanism for spreading the word. So what I found interesting is that he who controlled the pen and the ability to spread the world had the ability to shape minds and concepts that we before never knew possible. Like, for example, when talking about the story of Socrates, Socrates was one that preceded Jesus. He was in Greece at the time, and he was accused of, Socrates believed that knowledge and information, learning was not about putting information into people, but rather drawing out from them what it is that they already know innately. And so this idea that somebody writes down his words was something that he rejected. It was like, no, you lose meaning when you think that you can convey an idea with a sheet of paper. And so he wanted to really have people be present in the moment with the concepts and ideas that he shared, so that it was a drawing out of them. When it came down to Jesus, Jesus did not write down his own teaching or his own words, but rather he talked and people learned through parables. And then, hundreds of years after his death, Jesus's teachings were then written down. But during his lifetime, the only time Jesus was said to have written was when he was confronted by the mob who was trying to stone a woman. And Jesus, he says, bent down and wrote in the sand, in the dirt. And as he wrote in the dirt, he said, "He who is without sin, let him cast the first stone." And so there is no record of him ever writing, except for in that one particular place. And so now what we have is that we have a culture that by and large has been shaped by paper, pen, and what we call the written word. This idea that these words have the ability not only to inform us, but to conform us, whether we're talking about governance and laws, whether we're talking about the things that we learn teaching, whether we're talking about finances and accounting, whether we're talking about, whatever it is as if the paper has now replaced remember when it was the system of honor and a person could talk about things with a handshake or make agreements based on a handshake. And so all of that has been replaced. And in the book, he says, isn't it ironic that, hey, Kathy, he says, isn't it ironic that in the beginning was the Word was God. The Word was with God, right? It said, and the Word became flesh. And so you have all of this. So if you could imagine how important people who knew how to write and read were to society, if you could just imagine that for a moment, that they were the people who were able to decide or decipher what was important, what was to be passed along, and all these other things. Well, you might wonder why it is that I bring this up on a Sunday, in a Sunday talk. And by and large, it's because there is this thing, as I read and as I study, I think that there is so much that has been lost in the teachings and in the understanding of the texts that we read and that we hold to. If you will, in our teaching, New Thought teachings, we talk about this power of mind, how we have the ability to shape and change our own destinies through thought and through thought alone. This idea that is as my mind, as I am able to shape the world that I want to step into through this power of mind and imagination, through this using of the spiritual principles that I know and I hold to be true, and then project those into the world. I get to give shape to things. Now, it's really interesting to me because when you think about the things that we have learned over and over again, we are taught out of a tradition that has been passed down for centuries through this concept of the written word. Many people try to know and understand God based on a written word, but really have missed the idea that word that we are cleaving to, that we are clinging to, is one that also must be written within us. Just like it's written in the caves, it must also be written on our hearts. And if we think that it is only about an object that stands outside of us and not that which is within us, then we have real issues or real problems. When we think about some of the stories that have been passed down, the people who found these stories to be important have imbued them with the meaning while what do I want to say? Skirting over other ideas. There have been stories that I've read in the Bible where they talk about 80,000 people falling or dying or being killed. There, people have been killed, wars raged, massacres that have happened, all in the name of this, of the changing over of from one culture to another, the advancing of this God or that God, the freeing of people or the subjugation of others. In one particular story that we hold in very high reverence, King Nebuchadnezzar, who for me was something that was very obscure until the Matrix came out, I'll be honest, and then they named a ship called the Nebuchadnezzar. I wanted to understand a little bit more about the story of King Nebuchadnezzar and why that particular story was so important to be passed down. Well, as you will remember, there was a lot of stuff. All of these stories take place for the most part in the Middle East, in the Egyptian, Mesopotamia, Greece, all of that particular area. The northern Africa, throughout that Mediterranean area, all of these stories seem to give rise in that particular place. Rome, Italy, all of those places around there. And we don't necessarily think about it in terms of the dynamics of what was happening then. But Nebuchadnezzar, as he took over this one particular land, he said to his generals, he says, "Bring me back some young men, make them intelligent, make sure they're intelligent and good looking. And I want to teach them about our culture and our customs." And so he brought back these 4 men and he changed their name. It was Daniel. You guys will remember these stories. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All 4 of them were held as prisoners to be tutored in the tradition and in the culture of this new king that they were to worship. And as they did that, that was when their names were changed to these acceptable names. So even in honoring them in the place that they stand, we don't honor them in their traditional name, in the name of their family or in their parentage, but rather the names that were given to them by their captor. I think about that in terms of this idea, even of the what has happened to African Americans in this country. We saw during Roots the struggle between being called Toby or Kunta Kinte, and whether or not it honors somebody or dishonors them by not recognizing that they were born and gifted by their parents with a particular identity that was now ripped from them and replaced with one that was acceptable by their captors. Not only was their names changed, but so too their language, and their food was also changed. In the story, it says that because they were being groomed for a particular position, they were eating food that was at the king's table, right? Whether it was the meat that was at his table or the wine that was at his table, the guards were feeding them from the king's table to make sure that they were growing strong and handsome as he wanted them to be, for whatever reason. Of course, this is that area. And so the 4 young men decided that is not our culture. And so they asked the guards to please give us just vegetables and water. And the guards were saying, but you're going to get us in trouble if we're just feeding you that stuff, because he wants to see you healthy and strong. And they said, well, if you just give us what we are accustomed to, vegetables and water, if you give us our diet, because that goes against our diet, if you just give us what he says, we will be. And so what the guards did was is they went against the king's orders, and they did feed them what they wanted. Well, we know the story of Daniel and the lion's den. We also know the story of the fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We hoop and holler about these things all the time, but really don't understand the underlying implications of what was being done. The story comes out of a culture that was trying to tell the Jewish people that if you hold to the principles, if you hold on to the integrity of the principles that of tenets of this religion, of this culture, you will be protected. God will protect you. And by doing so, what they were doing was overriding the new rule that was trying to be imposed upon them by this king. And so whether you are looking at this from a standpoint of view of, of how God will step in and intercede, or this ability to hold fast to your faith, at any rate, it is sometimes overlooked the raping, the pillaging, and the killing of cultures in the name of the advancement of societies. We have seen this over and over again, and yet and still, when it comes down to just here, like, heaven forbid that 10 people get killed when they are celebrating their own culture, and then we're mortified by that. But it has been going on forever. We turn and we look at what's going on in Ukraine, and without understanding that this is the way that the world has been won over and over again, we ask ourselves, what is our role in all of this? And so when you think about this spiritual identity that is your own, what is it that you are to bring to this? What is it that, what insights do you bring into that? It's not just about what happened to them, but what's happening within you right now. When I think about the stories, whether it is the story of Daniel, whether it's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whether it is Nebuchadnezzar, whether it is David, whether it is Jesus, whether it is Ruth, when I think about all of these stories, what I'm saying and what the question is what is here for me? We can exalt and lift up people a lot of times who seems as if they are in the control or in control, who have won the wars or who have decimated whole generations of people and families. We can look at those folks and we can either hold them in high esteem because they have conquered, or we can look at it for what it is and what it is telling us about our own, what we ourselves are bringing to the table. Who do you want to be through all of this? Are you a person of faith, or are you a person of about paper, right? Sometimes I think about the ways at which people sold off or purchased land from people by trying to swindle and bamboozle. This has been done over and over again. I have this lovely mirror. You've never seen a glass like this. And they'll sell you a mirror in exchange for a piece of land. Get it in writing and then say to you, well, just because you didn't know it didn't have any value, or that its value was not worth what it was, that where is the integrity in that? What do we hold up? What do we hold up as something? People selling off with glass, selling land for glass, or doing something else that was basically trying to, disempower some while empowering others. What is it that is being done in your name? Even now, as we look at the billions of dollars that is being pumped into Ukraine, or the billions of dollars that are, that is being asked for, requested, and then given, what is it that is being done, and what role are we playing when we turn a blind eye? Are we turning a blind eye when people are ripped from their parents? Are we turning a blind eye when land is being, repurposed and taken away? Are we turning a blind eye because what we think that it doesn't have an impact? If this generation, if right now we are writing a new book for the Bible, where do we stand in the midst of this? And so if we could look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, if we could look at Daniel, if we could look at the Jesuses, if we could look at all the different people of the world and basically look at their things and hold that up, are we not also required to do something in our own generation? I don't know about you, but there is a part of me that believes that we are being called to higher ground. We are being called to reevaluate what it is that we think and we believe and how we engage in the world. Because no matter where you are, if you are in the United States, or whether you're in Ohio, whether you are in Egypt, or whether you are in some other place, there are always things going on around you that we can and must do. So when we talk about this idea of artificial intelligence, when we talk about the idea of what it means to learn, what role are we playing if we sit back and don't try to foster a culture that helps people to make sense out of what they're seeing? When we are asked to go out and to share the information that we've received, when we're asked to even when we go into our churches and our synagogues and the different places, when we're asked to hear but not speak, when we're asked to follow but not understand, when we're asked to do things that circumvent our thinking, what does that say to generations down the line? This idea of our own intelligence has been one that has been fought for and won. And to some extent, it seems as though we will just give it away without ever really even fighting for it. So it is my hope that that through all of this, we will learn how to look at history, not as a story that has happened long ago, but one that is living right now. That the past isn't actually over, but rather it is still unfolding in the present moment. And when we think about the ideas of integrity and honor and compassion, when we talk about and think about what it is that, in our minds, in our mental ability, and don't let it just be for me and myself alone, but rather for all those that we touch, all of those in our lives. Let us be about seeing what it truly means to love ye one another as I have loved you. that's what I got for you today. I am so honored to be able to talk to you because, part of this is that I want us to be aware of that we, each and every one of us, is a divine being. And the energy that we bring to the world matters. The times that we speak up and the times that we remain silent. And there are no small players. That each and every one of you has an impact with your voice simply by showing up and speaking your truth. A lot of times we don't even know. You could be a teacher and have, all these folks in your classroom. They are listening and watching you, and they take their cues from what you do. You could be a singer and people are listening to you and they take their cues by how you show up and what you choose to sing and what you choose to focus on. You could have grandchildren or great grandchildren that will be looking at your life and your legacy, and it will continue to speak long after you have gone from this place. So when you show up, it matters. It matters. And so for each and every one of us, we have to figure out for ourselves who we want to be. Do we want to be the King Nebuchadnezzar who was willing to kill everybody because they couldn't interpret a dream that he himself forgot? Or do we want to be a person who then, holds to principles, that speaks to love, that sees and honors everyone? Who do you decide to be? Who do you say you are? That was what Jesus asked. He says, who do you say I am? Who do you say you are? You can show that through what it is that you do, how you show it up, what you share, all of those things. It shows up. You guys, let your minds be transformed by the receiving of the word, by the propagation of the word. Let it be transformed so that it can also transform others. Get out there and keep loving and planting seeds. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your supporting this ministry. I appreciate all that you do. I appreciate you allowing yourself to receive these words, and not just as words to kind of entertain you, but let them be words that shine a light on a path for you so that you think about what it is that you do as you move forward. I love you. I thank you for being here. And with that, I am just recognizing blessings for you. I am recognizing power in you that you may not even know is in there yourself. I am knowing that you were born for such a time as this, to do work that only you can. And as you say yes to it, your gifts will make room for you, right? As you say yes to it, you will be propelled into new arenas and new avenues, that it will spread larger and far beyond your own lifetime. I'm knowing that for you. I'm blessing you. I'm blessing all that is in your life, in your plans. I thank you for being here. I know that the light of God surrounds you. The love of God enfolds you. The power of God protects you. The presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God is, because that is what you are. And so it is. I bless you. Information on how to contribute will be up in this afterwards. My apologies to you. I had issues getting my my other thing up and running, but again, I will be here as I am every Sunday at 1 o'clock, or every weekday. I'm here at the 8ish. I'm making it in about 8:15, but I'm here every morning at about 8ish, 8:15. Every morning. So look forward for my post, or look for them on the class that I have coming up. I love you. I'll see you soon. Blessings. And bye-bye.
Recording stuff.
All right. And you guys like and comment and follow me. Yeah, thank you for being here. Take care. I'm Sandra Bishop.